Good morning, folks. This is a business meeting of the New York City Water Board. We are in the virtual conference format due to the pandemic. I would ask that everyone please place their phone on mute unless they are a member or a city official speaking on the call. We are recording the call, and an audio transcript as well as a copy of the recording will be placed on the board's website later this week. The materials for this meeting we will be discussing have been provided to all the board members electronically. If a member of the public wants to review them as well, they are on the board's website right now. On the far right-hand side, under announcements, just put NYC Waterboard in your search browser or type the URL nyc.gov/nycwaterboard, one word. The last thing, we have that real-time text captioning feature available. It's a long URL. I won't read it. But if you want the streamtext.net link, pull the agenda from that PDF packet I described, copy and paste the link, and there's an accessibility option for those who need it. That's everything from me, so Mr. Secretary, it's yours.
Al, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Get us
ready
going, please.
for me to call the roll?
Yes,
Mr.
sir,
Chairman?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, calling the roll. Chairman Carney?
I am with us. I'm with us
Okay,
here.
very good. Member Carolina? Member Fernandez Ketchum?
Good morning, everyone here.
Good morning. Member Freed? Member Golden?
I'm here. Good morning.
Welcome,
Good morning.
GK. Good to hear you.
Jonathan. Member Sue?
Here.
Okay. And Member Shaw?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
We have a quorum. Let's get going quickly. There's a lot to cover today.
And my apologies. This is Adam Freed joining.
Oh, hey, Adam. So we've got.
Very
I'm sorry. We have Freed. We have Golden. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes,
Hey,
I'm
John.
here.
Okay, so we're missing Demetrius.
He did not respond.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. And forgive me, John, for calling you GK a second ago. The first agenda item is the approval of the transcript. Thank you. The approval of the transcript of the March meeting. You all have had a chance to read the transcript. Thank you very much, Omar, for getting it in, getting it to us. Are there any questions about it or suggested revisions? Hearing none, rather than asking you to aye or raise your hand, what I will do is to ask whether there are. Well, I'll ask for a motion first to approve the minutes or the transcript. May I have that motion?
So moved, Arlene Shaw.
Thank you, Arlene. Is there a second?
Second,
is there,
this is John Golden.
John, thank you very much. You all have heard the motion. Are there any objections to the motion to approve the transcript? Hearing none, are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, that we will approve the transcript as it appears, and we will do that unanimously. The second agenda item is the presentation by the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development. Before I do that, let me say that David Womack and Olga Chernak are on the call from the Water Finance Authority, and our rate consultants Ed Marcus and Shan Lin from Amawak are on the call. The presentation will be given by the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. I don't know who's going to start it, but I'll step back and let you all have the floor.
Hi. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. So if you guys want to turn to your PDF packet, my name that is our sort of like title page. So that's slide 1 or page 14 of your packet. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to present for the request to the New York City Water Board to transfer jurisdiction of Block 2494, Lot 6 to the New York City Department of Housing Preservation Development. My name is Lynn Zhang, and I am the Director of Brooklyn Planning at HPD. And today joining me on the line are some of my colleagues from HPD, Aaron Buchanan, Ariel Goldberg, Dan Moran, and Alice Hinterman, who will all be available for questions after this presentation. Please turn to slide 2 of the presentation or page 15 of the packet. Today we will discuss the Greenpoint Landing project. It involves the sale of a vacant city-owned property at Block 2494, Lot 6 on Brooklyn's Greenpoint waterfront, currently in DEP's jurisdiction. I will provide an overview of the larger Greenpoint Landing project, a description and history of DEP use on the subject city property, and HPD's request to the board to relinquish jurisdiction of Lot 6 that will facilitate the development of permanently affordable housing units in Brooklyn Community District 1. The next slide, page 16, it's just a title page, but we're going to first go over the overview of the Greenpoint Landing project. Slide 4, page 17 of your packet. Greenpoint Landing is a multi-phase development project located in the Greenpoint neighborhood along the formerly industrial waterfront within Brooklyn Community District 1. When complete, the entirety of the project will result in approximately 5,500 apartments, which will include roughly 1,400 affordable units. This multi-phase project includes 5 acres of publicly accessible open space and 5 upland connections to the waterfront. The project also includes new local retail opportunities, both along Commercial and West Streets, and also along the waterfront as well. Lastly, there are ongoing discussions about siting a public school within the development. Next slide, slide 5 or page 18 of your PDF packet. The map here included on this slide shows the number of units that are anticipated to be developed in each building across the development. As indicated on the map, 5 buildings have been completed in the last 5 years that resulted in new waterfront residential buildings that totaled around 1,074 units, and nearly half of those, approximately 529, are affordable units. 2 buildings are currently under construction, which are buildings D and H3, and those will also deliver another 349 affordable units. And 1 building, H1, H2, is anticipated to begin construction of this year. After the Greenpoint Williamsburg rezoning in 2005, the city entered into a points of agreement with the development team called Greenpoint Landing Associates to complete general waterfront infrastructure improvements in the area, as well as the development of 431 permanently affordable housing units that are identified in the red boxes on this map that you'll see here. They're known as E3 and H1, H2. Please scroll to page 19 of the packet now. The points of agreement in 2005 required Greenpoint Landing Associates to deliver 431 permanently affordable housing units, as well as 1.5 acres of new public parkland and new infrastructure to the area. The 431 units will be delivered in 2 phases. Phase 1 included the transfer of development rights and city land that resulted in the construction of a 98-unit permanently affordable housing building known as E3, which was completed in 2016. So the images on page 19 of the packet, they're images of the completed E3 project. Phase 2, which is related to today's request, includes the development of the remainder of the points of agreement units, 374 affordable units to be located at H1, H2, and infrastructure work, including stabilizing and repairing the waterfront platform and bulkhead for use as public open space, environmental remediation work, and street and associated infrastructure construction. The sale and conveyance of city-owned Block 2494 Lot 6 is required in facilitating the development of phase 2. And now if you turn to slide 7, page 20 of
may I ask a question, please?
Yes,
Sal Carney.
sure.
I don't know what page this is. It begins with block 2494, lot 6. Lot 6 is approximately 11,714 square feet, or about a quarter of an acre. That's the first sentence on that page. The last sentence on that page is, HPD is requesting the transfer of the balance of lot 6, approximately 0.2 acres, or 9,000 plus square feet, to facilitate phase 2. It gets confusing. I can't keep up with the numbers. Help me.
Sorry, I think you're ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're a little bit ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Forgive me.
No,
I'll wait for you to catch up. Forgive me for stepping into.
No, but I mean, it'd be great if you're on the same slide as I am. So I'm on page 20 of your packet.
Okay, and I'm looking at page 19 of the packet, and then page 20. Please go on. I'll catch up with you.
No, I'm sorry about that. I don't know if this is the best way of explaining, but it is page 20 of your packet, and it has 2 renderings on that slide.
Yes, I see that.
That's where I'm on.
Okay, I'm on that one now too.
Great, fantastic. So the images on the slide, they're render views of H1 and H2. They're you have the bird's eye view and the street level view as well. So this is the proposed building. So H1, H2, to be located at block 2472, lot 70, will be the affordable housing building associated with phase 2. It will have 374 affordable housing units. 334 of those units are required through the 2005 points of agreement, and another 40 units required through HPD's inclusionary housing program. So in total, this building will have 374 units. Okay. The project will be permanently affordable, and it will serve families and individuals making up to 90% of the area median income, which translates to roughly $96,000 for a family of 3. And the rents in this building will range from the lowest $215 for a studio up to $1,538 for a studio. And for a 2-bedroom unit, it starts from $512, going up to $2,307. So it's based on household size and their incomes. But all the units will be rent regulated, and that's what I mean when I say affordable housing. So HPD is expecting.
And sorry, this is Adam. Yeah. Just one question. I see that it says it's making up to 90%. Are there specific units that are being set aside within that income distribution for extremely low income, below 30%, and kind of the range within that?
Yep, absolutely. Yes, the range is up to 90, but there is a range, and the rents that you see on the slide, it shows that that lower range, right? So there are units that are $215 for a studio, and that I believe is for an individual making up to 30% of AMI.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So HPD, we're expecting to close in financing for this project later this June, and the building should be complete by 2023. So we can move on to the next slide is just, it's lot 6 background, so I'll go into that, to page 22 of the packet. So these are 2 images. On this slide, they outline lot 6 in yellow. So as you see, the site is in close proximity to the waterfront at the corner of Dumont and West Streets. And if we turn to the next page, page 23, it is, again, more history of lot 6. DEP acquired lot 6 in 1964. The site contained a sludge storage tank shown in the top image there, related to Newtown Creek plant. The tank and its associated infrastructure were successfully demolished and removed in 2014. DEP has no further use for the site, and as shown in the bottom image, the site is currently vacant and is surrounded by new residential development and infrastructure. So if you turn to the next page, page 24 is a tax map. Lot 6, outlined in red on the current tax map, is approximately, so I've caught up, Chair.
Yes, you have, and thank
you.
Forgive me for getting
that
ahead.
you were talking about. No apologies needed. So the lot 6 is approximately 11,714 square feet, and currently it includes a portion of the street bed of the future West Street. The board actually approved the transfer of the roadbed portion of lot 6, which is approximately 2,703 square feet, to the New York City Department of Transportation back in November of 2018. And that would help facilitate the construction of West Street between Dumont and Eagle Streets, which you see on the tax map right now. After the street improvement, so currently that street bed has not been improved, but after the street improvement, the roadbed portion lot 6 will be dissolved into the street bed and incorporate into DOT's portfolio for jurisdiction and management. So to facilitate all of this, phase 2 and the points of agreement commitments, we are requesting for the transfer of the remainder of the balance of lot 6, which is sort of right of the easement line within the red box. And that is about 9,011 square feet. So the next page is just another title page. Page 25 we could skip, and if we go to the last page of the presentation, page 26, it's our formal request. So we're requesting to the members of the Water Board today that Block 2494, Lot 6 be transferred to HPD that will support the development of affordable housing and infrastructure in the Greenpoint waterfront. Approval of this request will also help fulfill the commitments made by the city under the 2005 Greenpoint Williamsburg rezoning. After transferring Lot 6 to HPD, Lot 6 and its development rights, including the rights from the portion of the lot transferred to DOT, will be conveyed for market value to Greenpoint Landing Associates. So that will facilitate the remaining infrastructure work and the development of the rest of the 431 affordable units under the points of agreement in 2005. Because the affordable housing requires bond financing, this discretionary approval, that we're asking of the board today must be completed in May in advance of the New York City Housing Development Corporation's board meeting. So that concludes the presentation. Thank you again for this opportunity. And at this time, we, myself, my colleagues, Aaron Buchanan, Alice Hinterman, and Dan Moran, we'd be happy to take any questions from the members about this request. Thank you.
Do the members have questions of the director?
Mr. Chair, this is John Golden. I have a question. I just want to make sure that I heard something right at the end and understand it. The parcel that we would be conveying from the water system to HPD would then be turning around and selling to a private party. What happens to the money that is realized from that sale?
You beat me there, John. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yes, that is a very good question. And normally when HPD sell land, we sell it and they for $1 usually, because we have a developer developing 100% affordable units on that land. But in this case, what we negotiated was they would pay us market rate value for this land, and in turn they would build 100% affordable housing on land that they own. So that is H1, H2. That's on lot 70 that I talked about a little bit in the presentation. And then also they would also build out some of the infrastructure, because if you look at the aerial view on on page 22, that area is really hasn't, it needs to be developed. There needs to be streets, there needs to be infrastructure that needs to be put in place. And so part of the negotiated deal is that they would also do some of the infrastructure, and that would be a credit against sort of the appraised value that the city is getting for that land. So although they're not building the affordable housing on lot 6, that is being built nearby on lot 70, and so that was the negotiation that the city made with this developer.
But just to be clear, the money that you will receive from, or that the city will receive from the sale to the private buyer will not be accrued to the benefit of the water system. It will go into the city's general funds.
That's correct. It will go into the general fund.
And if I may interject, Mr. Chair, members, this is Joe Murin, Executive Director. Just a reminder that the board's responsibility is that when we acquire land, and purchase that in any context, those lands are transferred from, our I don't even say it's our ownership. It's always owned by the city. So the question before the board is, not the value we're getting, but is there still any continued value to this property, to the system, as to what we would need to continue our operations. And with the removal of the sludge tank and the reconstruction of Newtown Creek plant, that sludge tank and all of its surrounding land and everything else became extraneous to our operations. So that's when we've got the new sludge vessels and how we're operating the Newtown Creek plant at this time. So any of those values that do accrue, they do accrue to the city, to the betterment of the city in general.
Thank you, Joe. This is John Golden again, and just Mr. Chair, if I might take the liberty of just asking one follow-up question.
Please.
I wonder whether just in order to understand what our fiduciary obligations are here and to whom they run, in connection with Joe's point, I wonder whether we ought to have an executive session with council so that we can have that clarified.
John, I don't have an objection to that at all. The transfer is clear to me. The ultimate beneficiary is not clear to me, even after Joe's comment. The city, I suppose, is the ultimate beneficiary, but I don't know who determines fair market value. I don't know any of the answers to the underlying questions. Executive session, maybe yes. Would be happy to support that if that's what you want to do. I just want to understand the money flow, and I'm still not sure I'm clear on that. But that said, Joe, as the CFO of DEP, I will accept your view for the moment and for the purpose of this vote, that the appropriate sums of money are going where they should be going. So I accept that, but I want to understand, who determines fair market value here?
I can help with that.
HPD, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Alice.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can help with that. In this case, it was predetermined as part of the negotiated deal with the developer that there would be an appraisal that would determine the fair market value for the sale of this land and associated air rights.
Okay, so there is an appraiser. Is that a single appraiser, or did we get a couple of appraisals? What is the process that is followed to make sure that the numbers are maximized for the city?
Yeah, so we actually there was a pretty intensive process for this and quite a bit of due diligence. So the agreement was that the developer who's purchasing the land and development rights would pay the hire of an appraisal that was done in 2014 and an appraisal that was done in 2021 more recently. It turned out in this case that the 2014 appraisal was higher, and so they'll be using that number. And HPD additionally did its own appraisal in 2021, just a couple months ago, which also backed up using the 2014 appraisal.
Okay, thank you for that. It's good to know that we had the option of opting for the 2014 appraisal. Terrific.
Yes, definitely.
John, do you want to have the executive session?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure what the right way to approach this is, and I defer to your judgment. My question is just the following: this presentation is very impressive, and it seems like a laudable project, and an impressive amount of work has obviously gone into this, and I think we all are supportive of the effort to develop affordable housing. My question is, if we are providing for the sale of land that's under control for the moment of the water system, shouldn't that money be used to defray the costs of running the water system, and therefore enable us to keep costs down? And especially given that we don't use the system for free at this point. And so rather than essentially gifting it to the city treasury, my question is, what our obligations are, notwithstanding the fact that this seems like a laudable and impressive project. And so I don't know whether that's best done in executive session or otherwise, but I do think it's something that we have to address.
It's a laudable project. It's clear that the powers that be have worked on this for a number of years. It's also clear that if we vote to do this, the benefit is to the city, not necessarily to the system, and the city may use that money as it chooses. I don't have an issue with that, John. My questions are all about fair market value, and I'm satisfied that we now know that we have a fair market value. Willing to concede that the city has absolute authority to accept that money, and willing to concede that the money might go to the city without question. But there are other board members on this call. Does anybody have a comment?
Yeah, this is Adam Freed. I was I was stuck on mute, but was going to raise all the questions that Jonathan's raising, just in terms of, particularly in light of the rental payment, if there are opportunities in the environment we're looking at, as we're here today, also talk about our rate increase, our rate proposal, just thinking about the flow of the funding and anything that can be done to benefit the ratepayers of the city more directly. So just was curious about the context and the precedent on the transfer of the property to the city and then the sale from there to the general fund versus anything that may benefit the water system.
Fair comment, Adam. Thank you. And I had not thought of it, frankly, as it could affect decisions that we will have to make with regard to the rate later on. I just had not.
Yes, and thank you, Adam, for articulating the point much more clearly than I did.
All right. Well, we're between a rock and a hard place here. We may. I don't know that an executive session. Mr. Secretary, are we in a position to have an executive session on this matter?
Yeah, this would be something that you could have an executive session on. However, Omar, does the conference call
permit us to get off and get on again?
Yeah, what we need to do, Al, what would make the most sense is leave this line open, let everyone stay on. I'll set up a second conference bridge and email it just to the members and staff in about 2 minutes. Okay. And then we all call into that, have the executive session in parallel, leave this line open, this will just be on hold, and we'll come back onto this line with the members and staff once that's done. Is that okay?
Works for me.
Juke,
you're short on time, and we need your vote, yay or nay, ultimately for the matter. How much time do you have? Juque?
I'm gonna run downstairs. and send it.
Yeah, all right.
Juque?
The chair,
Okay, you
just
still-
want you to know that
Juque, are you still there?
Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry, somebody was trying to get my attention.
It sounds like Demetrius Carolina, Dr. Demetrius Carolina is also on,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
So we should
outstanding.
still-
So if we lose
so we
Juque, we still have we had a quorum, so we've got a
Well,
quorum.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir?
and to the board members, this is Al Rodriguez. For what it's worth, I think what Joe Murin said with respect to the city's interest in the water system is absolutely correct and reflects the terms of the lease agreement between the city and the board. Anything that's all the facilities that are financed by the water authority and which are paid for from revenues, all of those facilities are at the end of the day owned by the city, although the board has a lease of those properties.
Well, Al,
and
here's the question.
just-
The question is whether or
Yeah.
not, and it's
Yeah.
Adam framed it exactly right. The question is, if those monies go into the city coffers as opposed to being used by the water board to affect the rates, to the water rate, and we're going to have that conversation later on. The question is whether or not, and it's John's and Adam's question. The question is whether or not the fiduciary obligation that we have to the water system has been met appropriately. And I hear you, but if we can keep the water rate down by applying these dollars to the water board consideration, then shouldn't don't we have an obligation to do that?
Well, I think that's a question for the board to discuss, and that's what you would discuss on the executive session.
In the executive session, that's right. So Omar, if you'll do that, if you
Omar just stepped away, Mr. Chair, because he's going down to his office to set the conference call up. So
Thanks,
we could
Joseph.
just bear with us.
And we lost Juque, I think. Are you still on, Juque? All right. So Demetrius, thank you for coming on. We lost Juque. He had a fairly hard stop just after 9:30. So we will have the executive session now, and move forward.
Sorry, this is Lynn from HPD. What does that mean in terms of, so you guys are going to discuss an executive session and perhaps vote after, or should we stay on
Yes,
for questions?
we cannot vote during an executive session. We can't make decisions that are away from the public during executive session. But what we're going to discuss, I think, are questions relating to the board's fiduciary duty. We'll address those questions. If there are questions that we need, and then for you to address, we'll write those down and make sure that we ask those when we come back into the public session, and then in the public session we'll vote.
And if
So we should stay on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Lynn. And Mr. Chair, this is Joe Murin again. Lynn, could you just tell for all of our understanding what was the appraised value from 2014 of this parcel?
I think it comes out to be about $35 per square feet. So altogether, Alice, do you happen to have that amount on hand?
I can look it up quickly. Yep, no problem.
And I think we could look it up. I think one of my colleagues is saying that under the charter, whenever there's city land that's being conveyed, that it must go to the general fund. So I don't know if that is sort of helpful in your discussion. And a little bit.
If that's the case, then
I think
we can discuss.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Please continue.
If that's the case, we can discuss fiduciary responsibility. But if the money must go to the general fund, if we don't have a choice in that matter, then we cannot speculate on whether the monies from this transaction might have been used to affect the water rate later on.
It's Omar. So I members and staff, there's an email in your inboxes with the conference number and passcode to dial into for the executive session. So you should have that in your inbox now.
Omar, it never
sorry,
works,
this
it
is
never
Ariel
works out that
Goldberg.
well, does it?
This is Ariel Goldberg, the colleague that Lynn referred to, and that is my understanding that when PD conveys on behalf of the city that those funds do need to go to the general fund.
If we have no choice in the matter, then an executive session isn't necessary. I mean,
Mr. Chairman, I would verify that any funds that the city receives can't be redirected directly. It has to go into the general fund, and then those funds have to be appropriated by the city council.
So this board,
there's not a way to redirect those monies.
So this board has no authority to assume that those funds might be usable in connection with keeping the rate lower. We can't do
Not
that.
Directly. Not directly.
I got it.
So
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Chair, with respect to, this is John Golden, with respect to whether or not they could be used indirectly for that purpose, I think it would be very helpful for us to know what the appraised value is, because if it is consequential, that may be a different conversation than if it is, in the grand scheme of things, de minimis. So I think
got
it would
it.
be very
I got
helpful for us
it. And I agree, John. Why don't we ask HPD to give us that number during this meeting? I'm coming to the conclusion that a closed session isn't necessary, John. Adam, I don't know if you agree, but if we don't have the authority to do what I thought we had the authority to do, then there's no reason to knowing the appraised value would help. But we cannot ourselves redirect that money, according to the secretary.
But based on what Alice said, I'm just, if it's $35 a square foot and the lot is 11,000 square feet, so that would give an appraised 11,714. That gives us an appraised value of somewhere around $400,000. Alice or someone.
Sure, I can jump in with the value.
I think I misspoke. I think it's 135.
135. Okay.
Yeah, and it's related to the amount of air rights that's tied to the site. So the appraised value is approximately $8.2 million, and there would be some discounts to that are related to infrastructure work that the developer is doing in the Greenpoint Landing area. So back of the envelope, I think it's more like 5.2 million after those credits.
Okay, all right.
But just to be clear again, those credits are not for water infrastructure, correct?
Right. That's right.
Correct.
So from the perspective of the water system, it's 8.2?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. John, it's not the best solution, but are you comfortable that we do not now need an executive session?
I think if without vitiating any privilege, if council can give us some comfort that in his opinion this does not create any kind of an issue with respect to our fiduciary duties to the water system, then I think that we do not need an executive session.
And if council's view on this is what I think it is, I agree with you.
Yeah, and this is Al Rodriguez. As in addition to my, this is just for public information. In addition to my duties as secretary for the board, I do from time to time provide legal advice to the board in my capacity as an attorney with the New York City Law Department. And in my opinion, the board would not be, contravening any fiduciary duty they have to the system or to its customers the board doesn't have any legal rights to the money, and that's the basis of that. If you don't have control over the money, then you don't have a fiduciary duty related to it.
But we do have the fiduciary responsibility to inquire, Al, which is what we're doing.
Oh, that's exactly right. That's exactly
I'm
right.
comfortable that we have answered the questions as best we can under the circumstances. We're in a position where it's unfortunate for the HPD deal that we are also looking at the water rates during this meeting. So the two have actually come together. Had they happened separately, probably wouldn't be an issue. But if you're comfortable that we have met our fiduciary obligation to the water system, and I personally think we have, then we don't have to go to a separate meeting. Adam, where are you on this?
Sorry, I was stuck on mute. If the precedent and the legal obligations that we, do not benefit and that it conveys back to the city, that seems fairly straightforward to me. And just share your, broader concerns on the timing, and also understanding some of the mechanisms with the rental payment and other things where there are fees passed on to ratepayers without some of the benefits. But it does make sense that the city would lease the property and it would then convey back to the city for it to dispose of to go into the general fund. So from a legal standpoint, that sounds like it makes sense if that's the reading from council.
Adam, thank you for that. Other members on the call, Arlene, you've become the legal conscience of this board. What do you think? I knew you'd like that.
I'm not the legal conscience. There are fundamental issues that I have with what we talk about, but it has nothing to do with what we're being asked to vote on. So there's no soapbox here today, because what I want to soapbox about has nothing to do with, it sounds like as a legal matter, it's kind of a foregone conclusion for what we can and cannot do, whether or not the city should, what is the true value, right? How long do these units have to remain affordable? There's a lot of other questions I have, but they're not the subject of this conversation.
Absolutely right. I mean, of course you're right about those things, but you're right. Those are not the subject matters of this conversation.
No. So the legal conscience and the legal conscience of the group, here's what the great minds in the room have said, and I get that we, our vote is yay or nay on whether or not we sell the land. And, if you think about what it means for redevelopment and green space and how the transformation of green space has been to communities in and around Brooklyn, and as a parent, you appreciate that. So, it sounds like the other issues I have, I should have been at the community board meeting to voice them.
Well, you missed that opportunity, Arlene. You'll have to try the next community board with the next proposed transfer of property. Affordable housing for me is a big issue here.
I want to be given the opportunity to buy it, because I would have bought that for 1.4.
Yeah, of course, of course. Demetrius, you've heard a lot of the discussion back and forth. Do you have any questions?
I have no questions, and again, I certainly stand satisfied with regard to the obligations of the water board with regard to this particular parcel of land. And I do understand also there's a time constraint to this as well.
Yeah, yes, there is. There is. Thank you very much, Demetrius. Then we're not going to go to executive session. Omar, thank you very much for setting it up. Are there other questions from the members about the substantive part of the HPD presentation?
This is Adam Freed. No questions, but just wanted to, since we got so much time stuck about the legal issues around the conveyance, just recognizing HPD for the merits of this project and for the tremendous work that they've been doing as a national leader on housing and housing affordability issues, and creatively reusing city-owned parcels, I think, is one of the key ways of doing this. So, notwithstanding the questions we've been asking, does not demonstrate a lack of enthusiasm, appreciation, and excitement for the type of work and the role that the water board can play in facilitating that.
You said it far better, Adam, than I could ever say it. Thank you so much. Affordable housing has become a principal issue for me in New York. This project demonstrates that we are giving serious thought, and we're actually acting on that thought in making at least the Brooklyn community affordable for more and more people. It's a terrific effort that HPD has made, and HPD gets all the appropriate accolades for having done it. Thank you all very much. There is a resolution. It has to be voted upon. If there are no further questions, I'll ask for a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Thank you, Adam. Is there a second?
Second.
Demetrius, thank you very much. We'll vote differently. I will ask whether there are any objections to the resolution and to the motion as offered. Hearing none, are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, the motion passes. It passes unanimously. The resolution is approved. We now go on to item 4 on the agenda. I think that's right. Omar, are you there?
Yes, we're all here.
Okay, we're at agenda item 4, which is the DEP presentation on the FY the 2022 water rates.
Okay, all right, folks. This is Omar Nas, the Treasurer, Commissioner Vincent Sapienza, and Chief Financial Officer and Board Executive Director Joe Murin are here too. We're going to tag team this presentation in cooperation with a couple of other folks who may jump in on specific subject matters. Let me go to page 2 of the rate proposal presentation. This is the blue and white sheet that says agenda for today at the very top. This is what we're going to talk about. We're going to give you an update on what's been happening at the agency over the last year with the pandemic still ongoing. We'll give you a financial and capital markets update. We're going to tell you what we are proposing to the board as the approach for the coming fiscal year's water and sewer rates in the city. We're going to walk you through some administrative policy update proposals that will go into the rate schedule. We'll give you a first look at what we think the board's FY22 budget will be on preliminary numbers, and then we'll finish up with a proposed approach to water rates for our customers outside the city, those communities north of the city in Westchester and the surrounding counties who we bill a lot of wholesale rates. I'm going to pass it to Commissioner Sapienza now.
Thank you, Omar, and good morning, Chair Carney and members. I'll jump right in. This is slide 3 now of the water rate presentation. So just wanted to give a quick overview of DEP operations in the last year. Needless to say, there were a lot of changes, but water and wastewater services were fully maintained throughout the pandemic without interruption. Certainly a credit to our frontline employees who reported to work every day throughout the entirety of the pandemic. We followed close CDC guidelines for both our field staff and in-office staffs to make sure that employees were kept safe. For those employees who were able to work remotely in a digital format, like our administrative and legal staffs, they did primarily telework from home through most of the pandemic. And for those who did have to come into either the office or the field, we implemented social distancing, on-site temperature checks, and PPE. We've now, as of last week, on May 3rd, started to having the telework staff come back into the office more frequently. So as of last week, we had about 70% of DEP personnel on site, either in the office or the field. Some of the pandemic measures remain in place as we continue to move forward. There's still a moratorium on water shutoffs, and there's digital work permitting, as well as a pause on certain filing deadlines, such as billing appeals. That's where we are there. If there's no questions, I'll move on to slide 4 in the deck. This is just some of the capital construction work that was either completed or begun over the past year. And certainly last spring, around this time, projects were being delayed because of the pandemic, but we quickly picked up probably around last June and
And here's a handful of some of the great projects that were either completed or started. Drainage improvements in Queens along Shore Boulevard and Astoria Park, done last summer. In the fall, we commenced 7 new miles of water mains in Gravesend and Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. In October, the big Pugsley Creek cleanup in the Bronx. This was a combined sewer overflow job. $106 million was completed. In November, we started work in the Bronx on the Morris Avenue Plaza. That was water main and sewer work. And in that same month, flooding mitigation work in Southeast Queens as part of the big effort to improve drainage there was committed. In December, work in Staten Island for Bay Terrace along troubled area for flooding. That work was done. In January, we completed work on a large water connection between Randall's Island and Ward's Island from Manhattan, a new water main there to serve those on the island. And then in February, this is our big Delaware Aqueduct bypass tunnel, the 2.5-mile tunnel that was completed. We installed the final liner, 14-foot diameter, inside concrete liner, and that was done. Work is on time, on schedule, and next year we will actually be doing the shutdown of the Delaware Aqueduct to connect this new tunnel.
How long will that take, Commissioner? It's Al Carney. It's just you shut
Chair
down
Carney.
Delaware. Yes.
Yeah, so the Delaware Aqueduct, which provides about 50% of the city's water supply currently, will be shut down. Will be shut down for about a 5-month period, starting in the fall of 2022 and into early 2023. We will be using water from the Catskill system and the Croton systems, but the work will be done during the colder months when city demands for water is lower.
Demand is less. That's a big deal to shut down 50% of the water supply to New York City. That's huge.
It certainly will be, but we've been preparing for years for this, Chair Carney, and we think we've got it all figured out. So.
And I have no doubt you do. It struck me that this is a big deal, and for 5 months and the other supply, the remaining the 2 sources of supply that we will use as an alternative will provide the volume that you all believe is going to. It may not be the same, but it will be sufficient to meet the need.
It will. So from the Croton system, we completed the filtration plant in 2015. That can provide up to 30% of the city's water demand, and from a system that traditionally we haven't used much, the older Croton system. But it meets all water quality standards now with the plant in place. And then the other 70%, the other 700 million gallons from the Catskill system. So we have adequate supplies from both during the colder months.
Commissioner, thank you for permitting me to interrupt you this way. It struck me as a huge deal. It is a huge deal. Thank you for explaining.
Pleasure. I'll now hand it off to Joe Murin.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning again, everyone. So this is Joe Murin, Chief Financial Officer for DEP, and I'm on slide 5, an update on board's operating revenue trends. And what we have here is a bar chart which compares like to like, which is a 10-month period for the fiscal years 2019, 2020, and 2021 of actual revenue collections. And as you could see from there, we had a steady, increase for 19 over 20, but then a drop from 20 to 21 of $175 million in revenue year over, month to month over the years from there. So that still continues to be a concern to the system, that we're not quite back from where we were when we pre-pandemic. The board's fiscal year 2021 budget assumed revenue would be reduced due to the pandemic, so some of this reduction was baked into our assumptions there. The system still faces considerable financial uncertainty, and there is less financial cushion than prior to the pandemic due to this reduction in revenues. In addition, overdue bills at the 180-day mark as of March 31st are up 26.6% than last year, including additional 16,651 newly delinquent accounts since last year. So this is really giving us pause for continuing to be extremely cautious in the assumptions we'll be going through as we look at the proposed rate projection. I'm going to pause there to see if, any of the board members have questions, on this portion of the presentation.
Yeah, well, this is Adam Freed. One question about the loss of revenues or revenue reduction. Is DEP or the water system receiving any revenue replacement through the ARP, or have there been discussions about how some of that funding could help support the decrease in revenues for the water system?
At this time, Board Member Freed, we have not yet received any, but we are working with, City Hall and the city's alleged affairs, operations to make sure that we're going to be able to access, as much of those fundings that are available. We believe that there are some, we just have to ensure what those revenue streams are going to be and how they would make their way from, the federal government through sometimes the state is the conduit, and then to the city and over to the system.
Joseph, it's Al. I'm guessing that you all have done projections, in furtherance of Adam's question, regarding how long we will be able to maintain the system and payments that we have to make, given the increasing number of delinquencies. Can you tell us how long the system can operate with this increasing number without receiving the federal funds?
Yeah.
Well, I think we could sustain it for a period of time, going, to another year to 2 years. But I'm going to let Omar, and then if he needs to, he can also, have our rate consultant, Ed Marcus, also speak to this.
I was just going to ask whether or not Ed is listening to this and whether or not he might be able to help. Thank you.
So it depends how you want to, it depends how you define sustain and what metrics you choose to look at. In terms of kind of the most narrow definition of, does the system have the revenues to reimburse the city for DEP's running expenses, and does the system have the revenues to provide the water authority with what it needs to meet contractual debt service owed to the bondholders, which are the two biggest line items, and I would say, Brett, the ones you think of first when you think of what the utilities expenses are. The current
in
revenue,
reverse order, Omar.
Reverse order, whichever order you choose. But if you think of those two items, the current revenues, even at their lowered rate, and the projections, which you have, it has a multi-year recovery from the pandemic baked into it. It's not a bounce back. It's not an L-shaped recovery. It's sort of a slow, kind of parabolic curve type of recovery that we're forecasting. We're okay on that front for some time to come. If you look at it from the credit ratings side, or kind of the investor community side, where the focus is on things like the ratio of revenues to debt service, the kind of questions around if there were a shock in market rates or market receptivity to the bonds and things got worse, do you have the money there to absorb changes in the debt structure? Things like how much, when you end the year and you have that, you have a cushion at the end that you roll forward to prepay next year's debt, as we have done for years on the structural feature that the investor community values highly. For those things, we could sustain it for a time, but every year that goes on, the lowered revenue rate would diminish a little bit the amount of buffer and that safety cushion the investor community and the rating agencies would look for. And after a time, you would start to hear comments, and there would be criticism if that went on for too long. But in terms of the core, can you make the contractual money on the debt? Can you reimburse the city for the utilities running costs? Those we are good today, and we are good for some time to come.
Okay, thank you, Omar. And Adam, thank you for the question. Mr. Quinn?
And I don't know, Ed, would you like to add anything to that, just, as the rate consultant?
I was just going to follow up on Omar's point that we are assuming a gradual recovery, both in terms of water consumption by the non-residential customers, which are down roughly 20%, but also a recovery in terms of collections as well. But we spread that out and assume now that it's not really until 2025 that the system is completely back to the pre-pandemic days. But the other point I wanted to make too, and Olga Cherna could add to this too, is that the system has also been positively impacted by a terrific interest rate environment. both in terms of the cost of variable rate debt as well as fixed rate debt. So that has produced some significant savings on the cost of service side, which has helped out quite a bit, and not just in the last year, but in prior years too, but particularly this past year.
Olga, are you on? Could you expand on Ed's comment, if you are?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Good to have you with us.
Ed is absolutely correct. The system and the financing program of the system have benefited for a number of years of incredibly low interest rate environment. I don't think this is news to anyone. We spoke about this. I feel like we speak about this pretty much every year. But post market disruption of last March due to COVID,
Yes.
which luckily was very brief, the market actually, the market conditions were very favorable for issuers, including Water Authority. And so we were able to sell and market $1.3 billion of new money bonds at incredibly low rates. We were also able to bring to the market $2 billion of refunding bonds, which got us about $450 million of net present value of savings. So all of that is supporting the current rate picture.
It's terrific. What's your crystal ball telling you about interest rates going forward?
That's a question that I think even the brightest minds of Wall Street are really have to get answered. But we'll see how things will develop. Right now, the market is getting more concerned about inflation, and inflation does mean higher interest rates.
Higher interest rates, right. I agree.
So,
Well,
it's always a very difficult thing to predict because you have multiple factors. Certain factors kind of pushing for higher rates, and certain factors like the pace of the economic recovery post-COVID pushing for lower rates. So, we'll have to be prepared for either environment.
And I absolutely agree, Olga. I won't ask you about unemployment and how that will affect interest rates going forward, because nobody knows right now. But what has just happened, what we have seen in the last week with regard to unemployment is troublesome, and we all have our notions about what impact that will have on interest rates. But fingers crossed. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer my silly questions.
Okay, if there's no other questions on slide 5, hearing none, I'm going to turn over slide 6 to Omar.
So as Joe highlighted, revenues are year-to-date lower than they were in either of the last 2 fiscal years. That's something we anticipated and built into the budget. There are really 2 principal causes for that. One, Joe mentioned the higher delinquency rate. As customers don't pay their bills, we can't recognize the revenues because there isn't a payment to recognize. The second is on the bills that are going out, there is generally lower water use. Since most of our customers are billed on a metered basis, where their bill is essentially the quantity of water used multiplied by the rates, less usage means lower bills, even for those customers who are remaining current on their bills. It's quite a different story, and Ed hinted to this. Based on the type of property you look at, we show this on the chart, really in kind of 3 segments. On the residential side, the small properties are actually up somewhat compared to last year, which is not totally surprising, since folks are at home much more than they used to be, and the smaller properties are generally kind of owner-occupied, kind of year-round city residents for the most part. The larger residential showing a small decline. Again, there's some, that's the investment property world. I've got folks, who live in multiple cities in cases. So you're seeing, a small decline there, but nothing, nothing that would be out of the ordinary for year-to-year fluctuations. A modest decline, I'd describe it. It's when you go to that non-residential category, which is only 1/5 of the revenues, but a large footprint in terms of kind of the city's economy and kind of the built environment, you've got a nearly 20% year-over-year decline, and that we've got a bunch of stuff, kind of squeezed into that one category, just in the interest of not overwhelming you with detail. But there's considerable variance whether you look at the schools and retail, which had smaller declines, all the way to the airports and the theaters and the entertainment venues, which are down 50-60% year over year. So, and those are your large customers in terms of their bills and the water usage. So, not a help. It's certainly a headwind in terms of where the revenues are, and kind of the second part of that story, in addition to the rising delinquencies issue. Slide 7, we have the Water Finance Authority folks on the phone too, who I'm sure will jump in. I'll just kind of summarize just kind of the key points I think we wanted to get across on this slide were, in contrast to the very volatile capital market conditions we saw last spring, the marketability of all tax-exempt bonds has improved compared to then, and the interest rates that investors are requesting to buy the bonds are dramatically improved. One data point, just to emphasize that, is on the variable rate bonds, which are not most of what we sell. They're about 1/4 of our total debt outstanding. Today, the rate of interest on those is less than 1/10%. If you went back to last spring, we were north of 5%, which is the spread between the two rates speaks for itself. Despite the kind of rockiness last year, the markets are settled down now. The authority's been able to sell its bonds at good rates. Our credit ratings, which are top-notch or next to top-notch from all the big three rating agencies, are still there. There's been no change in the ratings, no change in outlook. The other thing, we've chosen the chart at the bottom just to kind of give you a sense of where things are headed. Basically, the total system debt outstanding has been sideways for several years. It's bounced around a little bit. There's small percentage changes up and down, but we are starting to show projections where we think that in the next year or two we'll start to see small increases in the total amount of debt outstanding. Nothing I would describe as kind of unusual, but we are expecting to start to see more than those kind of hovering around 0% growth increases in the total stock of debt. But David and Olga, I'm sure, have a lot more to say and more kind of up-to-the-minute market commentary on what's going on the bond side.
David, Olga, either of you want to comment? I'm happy with Omar's comments, but if you have anything to add, we'd love to hear it.
Hi, Al. This is David Womack, Chief Executive Officer of the Water Authority. Omar covered it pretty well. The markets did, as you heard, the markets recovered quite rapidly, and the Water Authority benefited significantly through refinancings and its new money offerings. Our credit ratings remain strong. However, as the agencies have started to notice the pressure on rates, our forecast debt load, and it's something we have to watch. It's something we have to be very careful of. Ratings are very, as you know, are very precious, and that helps us secure capital at the lowest possible cost, and we're very protective of that. Olga, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think it's just in summary, I would say that, we're happy to report that the financing program is working well. And again, we were able to take advantage of incredibly favorable rate environment in fiscal 2021 year to date. And as always, we are, careful about our rate forecast and positioning ourselves to be able to run the program in any interest rate environment.
Thank you, Olga. Do the members have questions for David or Olga? Any questions about the interest rate environment, particularly, but also the ratings environment for our bonds? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Omar, you're on.
Chair Carney, so this is Vinny Sapienza. I'll do this next slide, which is slide 8 in the presentation. The 10-year capital investment plan, which for fiscal 22 through fiscal 31 is $20.4 billion. Rather than using a pie chart, we tried this graphic, and and each of the rectangles just shows the relative size of that particular item as a percentage of the $20.4 billion. So as you can see through there, a little more than a third is going towards wastewater treatment and wastewater management. $5 billion of the 20.4 is going for sewer extensions and replacements, including the Bluebell program, so that's mostly for water drainage. For water distribution, and about another $5 billion, and that includes the dam safety program. And then water supply and transmission, $2.33 billion, the rest for equipment. So that's the breakdown of the 10-year plan.
And this is Adam. Do you have an estimate for how much of the green infrastructure and kind of blue belt oriented programs represent within that?
Adam, this is Joe Murin. I think it's somewhere close to just maybe shy of $1 billion, but let me get back to you with an exact number.
Appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
And Adam, would you share that number with us once Joseph?
I'll shoot it to all the board, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
And I would also point out at this point that none of this funding, has any assumption to the earlier question from, I think it was Member Freed, for any stimulus funding at this point. We are continuing to have those discussions, as I said, internally and with the administration and, with, our federal and state, context to see what and how much we may be able to leverage both from the existing program as well as the proposed, infrastructure program that may be coming from the Biden administration.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, and I would just note there that there's a distinction between the ARP, which has been passed and has money flowing, and we just need to understand how it flows, as opposed to the American Jobs Plan, which still needs to be designed and passed.
They say fleshed out. Thank you, Adam.
Correct.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Slide 9 now. So this is the rate proposal for the next fiscal year, fiscal 22. So we're proposing a 2.76% rate increase for customers in New York City. That funds the needs of the system, as well as an increase in the customer affordability programs from $20 million a year to $30 million a year, which we think is important, as we still face pandemic challenges. The last bullet on that slide also, the mayor's executive budget calls for no rental payment from the water system in FY22. So that's included in this projection. The graphic below.
When will we know that projection? I guess there's no way to know when we will know if that's accurate.
Well, the budget office the budget office is required to deliver the board its budget certificate each year, which includes its certified operating and maintenance expense as well as the rental. We've received the certificate already for FY22.
Well, have we? Okay.
And the rental line is zero. So based on the legal documents we have, it is zero.
And I think that to add to that,
Joe, please.
Sorry, John. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jonathan. I'll let you go first.
Thank you. I was just going to ask on Omar's point about the certificate. If I recall from at least one prior year, if not two, we've had situations where the certificate has been amended retroactively, and so I want to make sure we're thoughtful about what we're putting on that line in terms of what that expenditure is reasonably expected to be, and hopefully we can consult with our auditors and whoever else, whatever other professionals are appropriate, in order to make that determination, because I think that we've had the experience a couple of times where we have in fact deemed that liability to be zero, and it's been changed after the fact, and I want to make sure that we're responsible in terms of really trying to create a thoughtful projection so that we don't end up then in a situation where we are underfunded.
John,
and I'm glad you asked that, Jonathan.
This board. Thank you for that. Joe, would you respond, please, to John's concern?
Sure. It was, and I'm glad I did let Jonathan, because to build on, he is correct. We did have amended certificates go out. But we did
But,
get
but, but,
a
but
very...
wait. What's important about that is that it was retroactive. They did the certificate and then amended the certificate retroactively to change the number. That's what's significant.
Yes, and that was, I think, given the time and place we were in last spring, summer, in the depth of the pandemic and the financial situation the city was in. Given the significant funding stream that the city is going to be experiencing and has, already gotten from the federal government, we've been given a very, very strong assurance from the administration that the rental payment will not be given. And barring some sort of unforeseen financial circumstances, which of course could happen in any instance, we're, very, very confident that there will be no request for a rental payment for fiscal year 22.
Fair enough. Joseph, thank you. I know it's a representation. It's the best you have to offer. We will rely on it and keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But we know that some other horrific financial situation, I suppose, could change the city's decision. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Switch here. Omar, slide 10.
Okay. So slide 10, to try and make the rate increase, the proposed rate increase, more relatable to a household budget, what we do on this slide is we look at the total year-on-year change, and then we spread it out over the 12 months just to try and relate it to how households typically see their budget. And the short version is, for whichever one of these rate plan assumptions you want to make, the monthly increase is somewhere in the range of $1.50 and $2.50, which is not a huge dollar sum. With the exception of customers who are on the minimum charge, this is the rate plan you get if you're using less than 90 gallons a day, where we switch you off volumetric and put you on it's 49 cents a day for water plus the sewer surcharge. It's $464 a year. Those rate plans will have no year-over-year rate increase. Everyone else, for typical usage, somewhere between $1.50 and $2.50 a month.
Okay.
Slide 11 is a little more detail on the customer affordability program expansion the commissioner mentioned. What the slide lays out is we have 3 bill credit programs that we think of as our marquee customer affordability programs. One is targeted at multifamily properties of 4 units and up. The second is targeted at smaller, mostly owner-occupied properties in the 1 to 4 unit range. And then we have a leak mitigation program where we write off part of a charge for leaks that are notified, and they tell us about it and then they fix it. You get a bill credit to offset the excess charge. So there's no change to leak forgiveness this year, but we're proposing. But we are talking about the 2 water assistance programs. The multifamily plan is a bill credit program where if a property is affordable, meaning it's subject to an affordability agreement with a city or state housing entity and has 15 years left to run on it, and is generally in good standing, and charges rents that are affordable based to an area median income calculation, you get a $250 bill credit for each qualified apartment unit in the building. That's a very successful program. It's essentially fully subscribed every year, and we're going to increase the funding on that one by $2 million, which lets us do an additional 8,000 apartment units worth of credits compared to what we've been doing the last couple of years. The larger dollar changes on the second program, the smaller property owner home water program, where we're doing 2 things there. We're going to expand significantly the list of property tax benefits and exemptions that qualify for the program. We're going to bring in the veterans, disabled crime victims, and some of the other smaller property tax exemption categories we haven't included before. To date, it's been more senior focused and just seniors with disabilities or lower incomes principally. We're going to expand the pool dramatically by bringing in the vets and the disabled crime victims. 1, which increases the number of properties, and then 2, we're going to move the bill credit size itself. It's $116 now, basically. We want to move it up from $116 to $145. So everybody in the pool is going to get a bigger bill credit if the policy is adopted as proposed, in addition to an expansion of the pool of people eligible in the program. The total dollar cost on that is movement from 6 to 14. So that's $8 million of the $10 million expansion is on the small property program. The other 2 is on the larger multifamily program. And then the small property owner program too is essentially, it's close to fully subscribed every year. Both programs are very popular with the public.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, slide 12. This is kind of our table
Sorry,
we show you.
this is Adam.
Sorry.
Just a quick question. Appreciate for the multifamily conservation program, we talk about the per residential unit increase. Do we have a sense of what the average amount of units per building is?
Yeah, it's an interesting tale. I would actually steer you away from the average because just in the multifamily world.
Or mean or median.
Yeah. Actually, most of the properties have 30 units and under. We have some larger that get into the hundreds, but it's if you kind of do the curve, it's like this big kind of J-shaped curve. Most of them are in that kind of smaller, 30. And really, when you get past, the low 100s, it starts to become pretty scarce in terms of who's applying. They're more in that kind of smaller property universe. The one exception is that some of the NYCHA properties are eligible. We cap NYCHA's participation at 20% of the program. Some of those properties are on the larger side, but generally it's kind of smaller, kind of smaller real estate operators, smaller investors owned or smaller housing group type owned properties who get most of the credits.
And then my other question, I think this goes back a couple slides, just as we think about the delinquencies. I know the emergency rental assistance program continues to be expanded and a lot of money flowing to New York, obviously not to completely meet the need. One of the eligible expenses within that is to pay delinquencies on utility bills. Do we anticipate some of those funding kind of trickling into the water authority for delinquent bills, or is that an open question at this point?
We've been exploring that because it's not 100% clear how those funds are going to flow. I should say the understanding is they're going to be coming from the Health and Human Services Administration. It's usually not a federal entity that we as DEP deal with. So we're coordinating with City Hall in terms of, and then it also will come down through New York State. So how those funds will make their way from the state to the city, and then how the city then decides to distribute those. We're assuming that we will be getting some portion of those, but they are not yet baked into this.
Cities were getting direct allocations for ERAP from Treasury.
Yeah.
Not flowing through the state. I know that most major cities were able to apply for a direct allocation in addition to anything they could receive from the state.
Okay, so I wasn't aware of that, but if that's the case, Adam, I'm going to follow up. Angela Licata, Deputy Commissioner Licata, who you're aware, she's been running point on this for us, so I'm going to talk to her and we'll
make that a follow up, Adam. That's
perfect. Yeah, just as we look at kind of the outers, I know there's a huge pressure on landlords and people who own these buildings, so and that cascades to us. So thank you, I appreciate that.
Hey, and we want to make sure that we're going to maximize whatever our ability is to avail ourselves of those funds as well.
Okay, if there are no additional questions on slide 11, I'm going to flip over to slide 12 now. This is a chart we've shown for several years now. When really the point it makes is that although the city's water charges generally go up as our expenses go up and running costs go up, other cities are increasing their water rates at an even higher percentage rate in a typical year. So if you compare what the typical user in this city is paying to a typical water customer in a pool of 30 other large comparable cities, we are on a relative basis becoming actually more affordable compared to other cities, even though our charges go up slightly each year. Because we've been in the 1, 2, 3% world for quite some time, and others are in the 4, 5, 6, 7% rate increase world. So some of the objection was cold comfort. You're raising my bill, but compared to what's going on elsewhere, it is actually relatively more affordable than many other cities.
Omar, thank you. I appreciate the slide. I appreciated more, I think, the slide that actually compared our increases to specific cities, large urban areas, metropolitan areas, that you all did not include this year.
We actually have that. We were trying to keep the presentation short. We actually have that slide, which we can post to the website and send to the members. No problem.
Thank you. I'd like to see it. I'd love to see it. Thank you.
We were trying to too. We had a big debate. Which one of the two do you want to do?
I got it. I understand. Thank you for having me.
I like this. We can do them both. No problem.
All right. Thank you.
I agree with the chair. I like that other one better, but
yeah. Thank you, Joseph.
Okay. There, I'm going to go on to slide 13 then. So these next 4 slides are all, to a lot of the public, honestly, you're going to come across as rate schedule minutia, but they're going to be the subject, they're going to be on the agenda for the public hearings, and they are important. The board's going to be asked to vote on them. So I should bear with me if these kind of veer into legalese at times.
Well, Omar, let's not. I mean, we
okay.
can read these slides.
I'll do the one sentence summary.
Okay.
Okay. The slide 13. We have. I said earlier, most customers build on the metered rate. We have some customers who are not. Most of those customers are larger multifamilies enrolled in what's called the Multifamily Conservation Program. You got to be metered and have be water efficient to be in the program and be generally affordable. If you are, then you get billed on a flat rate. To be in that program, you have to file paperwork verifying you did all the things we said you have to do. We have a tiny group of properties, which is down to about 6,000 now, who we automatically enrolled in this program a few years ago because they were on a rate plan we were phasing out, and not all of them have filed the paperwork yet. In the rate schedule, there's a surcharge you're supposed to get assessed if you don't do that. We're reluctant to do that because of the pandemic, because the pool of properties are generally affordable, and because a lot of them actually are compliant with the program terms. They just haven't got around to filing the paperwork yet. So what we're asking to do here is, like we did last year, suspend the penalty for one additional year, or the surcharge, I should say, through the end of 2022. There's a lot of history to that program, but they basically ask is, we're going to suspend that surcharge for another year. So that's slide 13.
It's a great idea, too. Thank you. Go ahead.
Slide 14. So if you don't pay your bill on time, the board DEP are required by state law to charge late interest on the bills. That's the statutory requirement to do. That's been the same since we were set up in 1985. There's been no change. It's a little tricky because the interest rate we're required to charge is supposed to be the same one that is charged on overdue property tax bills in the city, which makes sense. For a technical computer system limitation reason, for several years we've been charging of the 2 different interest rates you're supposed to charge based on whether a property is more or less valuable. We've been charging the lower rate, which is 5%, because the computer system is an older computer system that only handles a single rate of interest. We have a new computer system, which we've talked about in the past, which is a really nice Microsoft Dynamics system, and the entire agency's been involved in it. It's going to be coming online sometime in calendar year 2022, or 2021, I should say, this calendar year, and it can charge the 2 interest rates. So what we're doing is simply restating the state statutory authority that's been in place for a long time, that you got to charge the 2 interest rates, and amending the rate schedule to say that, instead of saying what it says currently, which is the actual administrative practice based on the fact we can only charge one of the 2 interest rates. So that's the long description of that. We're going to just simply restate the legal authority and instead of the actual administrative practice on the interest rates issue. The number of our 840,000 accounts, the number of accounts who would actually be impacted by this is about 40,000. That's accounts in the higher value bucket who have unpaid bills. So not most accounts will be completely unaffected by this. If you pay your bills on time, you're totally unaffected by it.
Okay.
Okay. Slides 15 and 16, I'm going to group together. We have 2 different things in the rate schedule that were put in place to incentivize property owners to install recycling assets. There's basically a water recycling asset in one billing provision, and there's a wastewater recycling asset, or private wastewater treatment billing discount in the second provision. We did this because we wanted to incentivize people to install, green, environmentally friendly improvements. We have not had a lot of uptake on these 2 billing discounts. Between the 2, I think we have fewer than 10 properties of our 840,000 accounts who receive either of the discounts. So there are things that we do have kind of green, environmentally friendly benefits. So that we're doing 2 things here. We're asking the board to consider doing 2 things here. The first ask is true of both billing discounts. We want to amend the rate schedule to move away from the idea that only a single property can apply for the recycling asset and retain that, but also let groups of properties, as in the case of larger developments, apply if they have a single water or wastewater recycling asset that they share and they use in different contributions withdrawal percentages. If you look at what's going on with some larger developments, that's what they're doing. There might be 7 properties in a larger development connected to a single water reuse system, and the rate schedule simply doesn't let you apply right now. It's based on that single property construct. So what we want to do is we're going to say, look, you can apply as a group. Every property's got to have a single standalone application. If there's a change in ownership or inability for the owners to cooperate, you'll lose the discount. You got to have the cooperation to get the discount in the first place. But it doesn't have to be a property with a recycling asset. It can be a group of properties sharing a recycling asset, either water or wastewater. And that's a common change for both the water reuse and the private wastewater treatment plant. We're asking for the same thing for both of them, in effect. On the wastewater one specifically, there's a second change we're asking the board to look at, which is in the rate schedule now. What the rate schedule basically says is, if you install a private wastewater treatment plant in a property and there's any release of sewage whatsoever into the city system, whether it's treated or untreated, you can't get the discount. There's a single number of properties who've actually received this discount and qualified for it. So what we're suggesting the board look at is moving that floor for allowable releases from 0% to 10% of the annual flows. That's subject to a calculation, a schematic analysis, and a long engineer's report, and all of it subject to extensive internal review by our billing department and our engineering teams as well. But the 0% allowable release is not attracted a lot of interest. In a billing plan, we're eager to see if there is more interest forward, like somewhat a higher threshold than the 0% allowable release. So those are the rate schedule asks. We're gonna have a long markup of the whole document on the website later today, showing the exact language for people in the industry as well as the new rates to the exact penny for all the different dollar amounts that people can review. Are there questions about any of the 4 rate schedule ideas?
None here, Omar. If we go then, where are we going to?
Okay, so I'm going to hand back to Joe for slide 7.
Right. So board members, we're on slide 17, which is the preliminary water board financial outlook. And this is a comparison of what, we estimate where we're going to land for fiscal year 2021, and then comparing it to what our preliminary estimate is for fiscal year 2022, both of which were used going into establishing the rate that we're proposing to the board today. And to the chair's earlier point, our biggest component, of course, being for debt service, the Water Authority doing our financing on the capital projects that the commissioner went through. And that has a slight change, not really in a percentage and dollar amount, going from 1.8 to just about a little under 1.8 billion. Then on the Dep Operations Maintenance, which covers all of the cost of maintaining the system, running, the staff and all the related contracts and other expenditures, that has a slight, increase, not so slight, I shouldn't say, but it's about going from 1.49 to 1.629. And there is some, movement within that because we did, as a result of the pandemic last year, we had significant underspending, and that was both because of, slowdown in the processing of things and just the general economic, delay in a lot of things. And some of those things were deferred or just, pushed into fiscal year 2020, to this fiscal year as well, and into, fiscal year 2022. When you look at the details, there are some additional increased expenses that we do have out there. One being that we are starting to plan for Gowanus Canal remediation design. This is our obligation to, put in place, designs for the in-canal remedy, which is being undertaken by National Grid, but which we as the city and the system as a subcomponent of the city's obligation is being required to pay for, that remedial design and eventually for the in-canal remedy that, is going to have to take place. There's also additional funding for dewatering at the Hellshead plant, which is necessary because there is dock repair going on, and that's having to, take into account those repairs taking place. So that's about $10 million. There's increased chlorine costs. That's about $7.8 million. And there's also the increased, the additional costs that we'll be incurring for the billing system, which Omar referenced before in terms of us putting that out and getting that up and running for fiscal year. It will happen in fiscal year 22, but will be in, we're looking towards the fall, early winter of calendar year 21. And then there's about $6 million for marine fleet operations for the wastewater treatment plants. There are any number of other things moving through there, but those are the biggest items on there. I'll pause for a moment to see if any of the board members have any questions before I move on to the other items. Okay, hearing none right now. And then there's also water board operations and water authority operations. Those are primarily the financing charges for the system, the water board operations. Again, there's a big pass-through here, which is for, and Omar, you could speak to this, for the AWR, which is the Service Line Protection Program, which basically we act as the conduit. We collect and then we just redisperse it back to...
The board is about half of the budget, 110, and the pass-throughs on the service line plan are 90% of the board's half, so...
Yeah. So it's
the authority has similar concentration. I think one of the interest, or the authority liquidity fees, I think, Olga, you can correct me, are similarly a very large percentage of the authority's.
And this is Adam, recognizing this is a really small part of the budget, but the one that kind of directly links to us in many ways, and it's about a 10% increase that we're seeing. Is this related to the pass-through for AWR, or are there particular expenses that we're incurring as a board that have changed?
No, it's not. There's some level of growth in the AWR program built in. We do have there's a couple of new agreements on the board side. The Paymentus agreement for electronic payment processing will add a couple $1 million, and the design build specialists, when they get started, will add probably another $500,000. But if you look at the history of these budgets, I mean, the board and authority combined tend to come in about 10% up below budget. So I think what we're seeing here is a kind of similar budget practice in the past, where you show growth and they come in under budget in the end.
Olga, you were going to add something on the water authority side?
Yes, so a very large part of the authority's budget relates to liquidity fees and remarketing agent fees, and those are services that are needed to support our variable rate program. So there has been some built-in inflation in those numbers. So our budget has moderately grown from fiscal 2021 to 2022, largely as a result of these two categories.
And then, as noted, we do not have, budgeted for fiscal year 22 any payment on the rental. So they're fairly steady, but there is at $3.5 billion for operational and financing charges, but some movement within that. Again, I'll pause to see if Chair or any of the members have any other questions.
Thank you, Joe. None here.
All right. Hearing none, I'm going to turn it back over to the commissioner. I'm sorry, Omar, you're going to handle this one. I'm sorry.
This is just for members of the public. Most of the board's revenue base and rate structure deals with charges for water use inside the city of New York. We have a second water supply aspect of what we do, which is selling water on what's known as a wholesale basis to communities and water districts located north of the city. There's a legal reason for this, which is if you're a town in a county where the city owns water supply assets, usually land, aqueducts, dams, and reservoirs, you have the right to buy water from us at this wholesale rate. We've been doing it. This arrangement's been in place for 150 years. The rate design is completely different. It's because it's across city lines. It's subject to review by the state to make sure the rate follows normal, appropriate rate setting methodologies. So you can't compare the dollars or percentages of the in-city to the upstate rate. They're completely different. And it's just from the charts alone, you see that. The recent history has been the in-city rate goes up by kind of inflationary type rates each year. The upstate rate is very complicated, and there's often an administrative process going on in the background to kind of adjust past charges or review the appropriateness of projected charges. And the recent history that's been the rate increases have been less regular on the wholesale side. If you kind of work out the math, the actual annualized increase is sort of in the 2 to 3% range for both in-city and wholesale, but the way it's delivered on the wholesale side is more sporadic. You have kind of years without, and then you have years of large rate increases, which is a difference in the nature of the rate framework that's in place. What we're proposing to do for FY22 is to make this a year of rate increase on the wholesale side with a specific rate increase for the. There are two different. There's basically a low usage rate and a high usage rate. Most of the water and revenues are associated with the lower usage tiered rate. We're proposing to increase that lower usage tiered rate by 8.82%. The exact decimal there to make the math work on the penny on the rate itself, which is considerably higher than what we did last year, which was no increase, or we did in a few fiscal years recently. It's similar to what we did in FY20, the last time this rate was increased, and it's similar to what we did back in FY16, the time before that. There's a second rate we charge as well, which is in terms of the water volumes, tiny. It's basically the sort of higher usage tiered rate, and we're going to propose to increase that second tier rate the way we have in years past, which is in line with the in-city increase of 2.76%. So basically, the lower usage tiered increase, where most of the water and revenues are, is an 8.82 proposal. The second higher usage tier is a 2.76% proposal, and we'll have there's a lot of there's supporting schedules and a report that will be up on the board's website shortly, detailing the assumptions and the calculation, and then it will be discussed at the rate hearings as well. And we'll come to those in a second for anyone on the phone focusing on the wholesale side.
And I would just add to, I'm sorry, but I would add that, be mindful that the upstate rate, the revenue that we get from the upstate rates is, a very minor portion of the overall revenues. It's about in the mid 70 million, range, and this will probably bring us closer to like 80 million plus of the, close to $3.5 billion that we do collect.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, I'm going to flip to slides 19 and 20. These explain the public hearing plan. We're going to be in this virtual hearing format through through most of June at least. So what we're going to do is a little bit different. On the in-city side, we're going to have two public hearings. One is a daytime, one is a nighttime on different dates. The idea that with this, it's senseless to have five. You can just call in from anywhere at one of these two times, one evening, one lunchtime. So we thought that would make sense and kind of be an efficient use of folks' time. The information, the dates, the times, the call-in information are on slide 20. They'll be up on the board's website. They're actually on there already in the presentation materials, and you'll see the public notice go up there later today and in the newspapers tomorrow. Then we'll do one rate hearing on June 3rd on the wholesale side. That's a daytime hearing as well, and you can see the conference numbers and phone numbers on slide 20 as well. The other event we need to announce is the actual reconvening of the board to vote on what the final package of rates and the budget for next year will be, and we need to schedule that, and that will be up on the board's website shortly. One thing I'm going to add is that we've been getting a lot of email inquiries. We have an email list at the board, which if you're interested in signing to our email list that has all these notices and announcements of events and links, send an email to the water board website at nycwaterboard@dep.nyc.gov. If you want to just get on the list and see the information as it comes out, sign up for that email list. That's probably the best way to get it. So that's everything on the logistics.
And Omar, my apologies, this is Adam again, and sorry for being the person to keep chiming in. Just one question on only having two hearings for the city. We typically have done 5, one in each borough. And knowing that we're not in physical locations with this, but just wondering if there's any contemplation of holding additional or more hearings to mimic what we've typically done in the past.
They're right now. The thought was two really. Our viewpoint was if you do the two hearings virtually and you kind of take you give people a lot of time to submit written testimony and to email and answer the questions, we thought you could get pretty good coverage that way. I'll say one thing driving this is if you look at the in-person hearings we had in the past, I mean, the typical attendance, in recent years, in like the last 5 or 6 years I'm talking about, would be, a typical hearing might have at most a dozen people. There was somewhere you got, one. There've been a couple over the years where no one showed up, and these virtual hearings, I mean, are running, for me, whether it's a meeting or hearing, are running 40, 50, 60 people. So just if you had a single public hearing, I mean, my best guess of the attendance would be in excess of the entire attendance of the in-person hearings in recent years. And if you have two of them, you could, you might be like tenfold where in-person attendance was. So, the thinking was, the two virtuals are accessible, and just the realized attendance is like so much higher. We talked a little bit about should you just do do five, and that was, well, why? You're getting so much. If you do one of them, you're getting such good attendance. Right now we're not. We're thinking of just the one daytime, one evening would probably draw a fairly large crowd. If that's something the board wants to talk about, we certainly can talk about it. But right now the thinking is just the two, one day, one evening, and our expectations the attendance will be.
Omar, Sal, I tend to agree with the decision to stay with the two public hearings for the reasons that you enunciate. We get better attendance when people don't have to come out in the rain and can sit at home and get on the phone. I mean, it makes sense. Adam, you may want to have more hearings. Right now, though, I don't see I don't know that that's a good use of the board's time, but because people can call in whenever they choose. If they see that there's a hearing being held, it doesn't matter what borough they're in, they can call in. Life is good.
My only concern is we're giving ample opportunity for the public. So if we're getting the higher attendance, to me that seems to be working well. But just I assumed it was
I agree.
being driven by that, but also wanted the public on folks on the call here to also hear their rationale and reasoning behind that and the results we've seen.
If we're getting good numbers and much larger numbers, I mean, you and I have been at hearings together where nobody showed up. It is what it is. If folk can call in and are calling in multiple numbers of what we see in person, then I'm comfortable with two. Is there anybody else on the phone who has a point of view? Well,
this is John. I would just ask if we have any kind of legal or statutory or regulatory obligation.
I'm pretty sure they've answered that question, John, but I don't think we have. We have had hearings in each of the 5 boroughs, but Al, if you're on and you have a point of view, let's.
Yeah, I'm still on the phone, and the public officers law that requires us, and the water board statute that requires us to have in-person meetings have been suspended by the governor's executive order that started way back at the beginning of the pandemic. So
sure,
that's still in effect. Currently, it's in effect.
I'm happy then to stay with the number of meetings. Yeah. I'm sorry, the 2 meetings that are accessible by anybody from any of the 5 boroughs makes sense to me. So my recommendation is that we stay with that. And we're losing people faster than a speeding bullet. I think we've used up our time. People are ready to go. How are we? We're looking at what I think is the last slide. We will prepare to have meetings early June. Is there anything else we need to cover in this meeting?
No, that's everything. Well, we'll be posting some additional information to the board's website later today, and that's and if folks should check the website, or if they want to sign up for the email list, that's the way to get information about this.
Terrific, Omar. Thank you. I want to thank the commissioner for joining us today, if he's still on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Sapienza, it's been terrific to have you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I also want to thank Al Rodriguez, who has done a magnificent job today of helping us to think through our fiduciary responsibility. Al, thank you. Very grateful for your sort of thinking out loud with us about what we need to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the acknowledgement. I appreciate
and then finally, the people at HPD, they offered us a terrific presentation today, and I think the board members were real clear in their questioning. Thank you all very much for what you did for us today, just to make the real estate matter as clear as you did. Are there any other matters to come before the board? Hearing none, if there are enough board members left for me to ask for a motion to adjourn.
This is John. I will move to adjourn.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Adam, I'll second.
Second.
Adam, thank you very, very much. If there are no objections to the motion and no abstentions from the vote, then we'll assume the motion passes unanimously and the meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you
a
all.
good day, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.